can get merchandise much cheaper in China. You can find ways of doing a lot of things in bulk. And therefore, you can try and edge your way towards better profitability. But if you're still in that mindset that says, well, now we're here, we've got to drive ourselves still, we're going to find ourselves in some trouble. And many companies are tacitly in trouble. We don't know when they're going to sort of burst at the seams and go, yeah, we're going to bust.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. You get better results faster by automating broken processes. In warehouse is a classic example when thinking through your physical processes, and aligning the physical and digital layout is important. But what most digital consultants, not expert at products or retail operations, miss the intel that is critical for the safety and warehouse efficiency. They might put a product at a location where it might not be safe for warehouse workers or might feel like a cart before a horse. And that's where you need a ton of expertise managing warehouses for the respective industry for digital implementation to be effective. In today's episode, our guest, Gary Newbury, discusses the importance of streamlining physical process for effective digital transformation of a warehouse. He also discusses why understanding of the product type while designing a warehouse layout is critical for operational efficiency and safety. Finally, he discusses several stories where implementing digital processes without thinking through physical processes resulted in warehouse disruptions. Let me introduce Gary to you. Gary is a highly experienced senior interim executive leader, a supply chain transformation expert, and change agent in more than 10 years at C-suite level across many components of end-to-end food, health, automotive, and GM retail supply chains, delivering rapid change in profitability and service levels to more than 50 businesses across his career to date. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Gary, welcome to the show.
Hi Sam, pleased to be here.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to have you as well, because the knowledge that you bring from the retail and supply chain world, that is always going for our listeners. Just to kick things off, Gary, if my audience may not know you, obviously you are very popular. Do you want to start with your quick intro as well as what you are focusing on these days?
I'm going to give my quick intro now, so stand by. My name is Gary Newbury. I'm an award-winning strategic advisor and delivery executive focused on the rapid transformation of disrupted supply chain performance across the end-to-end retail supply chain. So that it will include CPGs, manufacturing, third-party logistics, wholesaling, retailing, which is my sweet spot, and last mile logistics. So that end-to-end process. So my view of supply chain isn't just this, being in a category or a function of that supply chain. Just focus on that. It's across that whole picture.
Yeah, so very interesting, and that's what excites me, to be honest. Okay, I'm looking to see, what is happening in the entire picture, as well as, how do we draw the boundary between, different players that we have in the market, how the business model and the transactions are going to differ. So before we peel into that and dig into that, and I'm pretty sure you have a lot of stories that dig into, we have one of these standard questions that we ask every single guest, and that is going to be your perspective on business growth.
On business growth?
Yeah.
At this current time?
Open question, whatever perspective you want to share.
Well, how to, or what we seem to be experiencing. What we seem to be experiencing is a I think, a very mixed picture. We have coming out of the pandemic and into the cost of living crisis. It's very much changed the dynamic, and I'm going to be quite retail centric in some of his comments. Some things which grew up during it exploded almost during the pandemic have gone off the boil. And the difficulty with those is a lot of those companies, like Peloton's a great example, pat themselves on the back and said, "Look what we're doing. We've generated success." And of course, when the pandemic ran out and people started to inch their way back to the office, so they lost interest in their at-home cycle and went to the gym, went out, found themselves distracted. And then in the cost of living crisis that we're kind of still working through, plus all the disruption with, things like Walmart suddenly became, a very Costco, all these, let's call it less than premium priced propositions became, Dollar Tree, dollar store, etc., became very vibrant businesses. They had to get their logistics together, for want of a better way of doing it, because the demand switched from the high end of discretionary spending to the lower end of discretionary spending and essentials. Essentials became, food to live. So how do we pick our way through this at this point in time? And I've been saying for years, because we can't differentiate just on price. We have to differentiate on whole proposition, and that involves actually taking the 4 P's, as some of us learned back in uni and the like, to actually think of how do we differentiate ourselves more clearly. And that often means less SKUs, and being able to get off from that sort of running track of, we must get sales. We must actually focus on our bottom line, and that means a clear proposition, a compelling proposition, that when customers come into our store, they know what solution we're expecting to find, what problem we're working on, for which a solution is right in front of them. It's very clear to them. If you start to be a kind of multi-category, very wide retailer, any sale will do. People don't necessarily always, when they're working through, I need to get this solved, where do I go? Well, I could go to, let's say, Canadian Tire, because I've got a huge amount of different categories. But I'd actually like to go to a specialist where I can actually get somebody across the counter or in the store who can help me to actually really refine the solution I'm looking. So differentiation is key to grow the business during these, let's say, challenging times.
Yeah, could not agree more. And I think there are some very interesting layers in your conversation right there. One of them, obviously, is differentiation. We are going to talk about that. Then the another layer that you mentioned is this whole idea of Dollar Tree or similar, businesses. Regardless of, whatever type of business is going to be, I mean, you are going to have your own sort of business model in terms of what is your differentiator. Sometimes cost could be a differentiator, but you need to make sure that you understand that cost is a real differentiator for you, and you are aligning your business processes and as a result, obviously, systems as well, to make sure that you are really delivering on your promise of cost and not trying to be somebody who is differentiating based on something. So I don't know if you're going to have any follow-up commentary on these 2 comments that I made. And then, I obviously want to dig into these stories that you have, of the transformation journeys of different.
The whole idea of competing on cost has been with businesses in time. And their first idea was to scale their approach. So if you start off as a small independent, you buy a few more, or get a few more stores, and then you start ramming stuff into those stores, more categories, whatever, and you just grow and grow. And at some point you get into diminishing return. And so that's the end of your potential sales curve going forward. It's just going to grow by, say, inflation. So then you have to look inside the business and say, how do I create a more rationalized cost basis? Oh, look, we can go to China. We can get stuff at like 10 cents on the dollar over there. Oh, let's do that. And the trouble is that once we're into this chasing the dollars down, we can take people out of the stores. We don't, if we had a world where everybody came on staff at the start of shift and they worked way through, and we know our profile of customers coming in and needing service as more of a sort of normal distribution. We sort of say, well, you can come in a bit later and spread out your shift and and try and match that curve. As I say, you can get merchandise much cheaper in China. You can find ways of doing things, a lot of things in bulk. and therefore you can try and edge your way towards better profitability. But if you're still in that mindset that says, well, now we're here, we've got to drive ourselves still, we're going to find ourselves in some trouble, and many companies are tacitly in trouble. We don't know when they're going to sort of burst at the seams and go, yeah, we're in bust. But the interesting dynamic about the change to sourcing from local, where you would, just phone up your local supplier and you send a truck around with a couple of pallets on it, and we'll push it through to the stores, test it out, and we see, those stores over there on the west say they really like it, but on the east, they don't like it at all. So send us half a truck in, and we just send it out to the west. What happens is we convert it into cash fairly quickly, Barclays with Visa and cash, but we don't have to pay the supplier for another 60 or 90 days. So it's a positive effect. So as we grow sales, especially if we're in a differentiated marketplace, we grow sales, it grows profit. What happened when we moved to China? Because it was incremental. It didn't happen like, we're doing everything in China, stop it, and then we have to fix. How do we get it over here? I don't know. But because it was so incremental, we didn't actually notice the dynamic in the cash position, that we actually have to place an order 3 to 6 months before we get sight of it. We pay that up front, so we're not paying the supplier after we've got the cash, and we have to plan it on the basis that those customers we anticipated coming in and buying the stuff as it arrives just in time, we hope they turn up, because if they don't, we're in some difficulty. So many retailers and other businesses have changed their financial model and dynamic without really understanding that that's happened. So they're very vulnerable. Whereas before, you could stop things very quickly because you only brought in what you needed and sent it out. Now we have to place orders for container load. Hopefully they get made, because chances are we've focused our energy onto a single factory, and our competitors are probably in that same factory. So we're now competing with our competitors, not on the shop floor, but on the other shop floor where they're made. And we hope that it comes off in sort of chunks of containers. We hope there's a container. We hope we can get it to the boat, the right boat, gets it across, gets through the port, gets to our DC, and then we go, thank goodness we got it. Now we've got to sell it.
Yeah, so some very interesting layers there, to be honest. And I completely agree. Whenever you are going through any sort of change, transformation initiatives, especially with operations, and obviously they have, very specific way of doing things, just because they are running in the trenches. For them, problem solving. Okay, they are always trying to solve problems. And sometimes, when you have been playing with that mindset for a long time, you sort of lose that big picture. Either you are going to have very operational mindset, or you are going to have very, very, very strategic mindset who can look through, at the top, but then as well as translate at the operational level. So, depending upon what you are doing on a daily basis, your head is probably going to be wired in thinking in that direction, right? So that's how I have seen these things. But whenever any company is making any change, okay, regardless of whether this is going to be business model or transactional or physical or digital, okay, they don't invest enough time in thinking through all the possibilities and consequences, right? And that's why they typically struggle with the change. I don't know if you have any sort of follow-up commentary there on this. Go ahead.
A ton of examples. I mean, my business, my practice in the UK was helping companies through those times when they made this great change. The sales guy walked in with a glossy brochure, said, "You need this," and the president, CEO, managing director back in the UK said, "Yeah, we definitely need that."
Yes.
Right, get a team working together on this. All right, let's all do it on the side of a desk because we've got a full-time job over here. And like a sketchy imprint of a team assembled some thoughts. And as soon as they got something in a scoping document, everyone was, no, we want this done and we want that done. And, oh yeah, we needed that as well. And so the scope suddenly, you got massive mission crew.
Yeah.
And then they go back to the sales guy. Oh yeah, the system can do all that. Yeah, can is a critical word. Not will do it all at the vanilla pricing structure, but and do all that. And then they get into discussions about what it might look like and the cost, and it gets wrapped back.
Yeah.
So we set off on companies will set off on a plan to actually achieve this sort of restricted scoping. They've set up some timescale, And then that timescale becomes slightly unrealistic to the point you said that they didn't really think the thing through carefully enough. They didn't spend enough time in the effectively the design stage, and now we're into semi-implementation because we're committing to various configurations of systems and stuff. And then suddenly, from this, even imagine that this was the level that they were at, and this scoping put them up to here. You can always see evidence of the scoping document descending to where we were. And then, of course, it's had configuration for this great idea, but it's now the actual the physicality has dropped back down to what, just computerize what we do. And so I've had lots of situations where I've been brought in at that point, when the thing has been implemented and it's gone dreadfully wrong, and you have queues under lineups, blockages, bottlenecks on all fundamental processes to get an order processed out the building. One that always comes to mind because it's a rather vivid example. I did some work for a company called IBP Group back in the UK, and it was on the production side. The company made copper end fittings, so probably not so obvious here in Canada because we have what do you call a furnace and stuff like that. In the UK, you have radiators, so you have hot water pushed through metal fittings which fit in each room and it emanates heating. So I did some initial work in there, and I implemented agile manufacturing processes, which meant that what was happening was if a customer arrived and they placed their order and it was on the shelf, they'd ship it straight away. If the customer order came in and it was in production, it could be 2 to 3 weeks before it emerged, got into the warehouse, got shipped. If it wasn't even on the production plan, it could be at least 8 weeks. So you imagine you're a customer of a B2B customer, and these were retailers typically or trade counters. You didn't know what was it. How reliable is this company as a supplier? Because it could be tomorrow, it could be in 2 or 3 weeks' time, it could be in 2 months' time. And I've got tradespeople turning up to my trade counter saying, I want a 15 mil, got the copper end feed thing for this radiator, but Mrs. Jones has, complained that it's just broken down. I need my components. I need them now, and I need to go and fix this for her because there's water going all over the house. So I went in there to establish certain core products needed to be available, and some of these products needed additional services like chrome plated. So I did that piece of work, and I got called into a conversation. Said, look, Gary, we've had our top 30 managers sat in a dark room, being fed sandwiches for the last 11 months in Germany, and we're going to implement our ERP system. We don't need you. We appreciate what you've done. You really have tidied up my manufacturing, but this is the adults, and we know what we're doing. So anyway, I was working on something else at the time, and I got this cheapish phone call, and the HR person, weirdly, said, look, Gary, we've got a bit of a problem. I said, well, remember that conversation I said that because I'd mapped all the processes in the effectively the warehousing facility which the manufacturing went into. I said that we've got pretty sort of flaky processes, but at least people understood those. They worked two shifts. I think it was 5 days, and I've met all the individuals concerned, the matter, of course, of me mapping all the process. And I did tell you will have issues. I could almost specify what those issues were. So I said, well, come back on site and we'll see what you think. So I went back on site after a little discussion, and there was like 3 months of blockages on every process. So they were in the export business, which meant that they could only ship when the whole stock was complete. They couldn't ship again later. When I arrived, they had 6 JD Edwards, and it was JD Edwards, One World, on site, trying to unravel the mess that they got themselves in. They used to have one rather nice lady in the admin office. They had 10. They had gone to 724, and they had an error code called 3448. And they had to actually fly a guy in. He was an English guy, but he was based in Chicago. I had to fly him into the Midlands in England for him to look at the system and go, oh, I know what a 4344 error. It was actually allowing stock to be available in a non-pickable location. Now, for people who haven't worked in a warehouse, what does that mean? It means instead of blocking off if a stock is like a quarantine item or an item that's coming in from production, it needs to be released to be. That step would be moved off. So basically, if things were floating around in the warehouse, which were in no state to be shipped, the order was coming in from customers, and it was grabbing. So look, there's some stock. Throw it to that, and then of course, then the picking instruction was issued without it on it. It was saying, well, we can't ship it because it's an unpickable location. So we had to unravel that, but there was a huge amount of other unraveling to do because it was a union situation also. Extra thing in it. But I worked really well with the union. But fundamentally, I asked the question as soon as I arrived, once I worked out what the heck was going on. So, what's our line processing capacity? And they said, well, we don't know. So don't you think you better know? Because we've got all these different salespeople telling, can you pick this order for Wolseley, for Wicks, for Travis Perkins, whatever. And if we don't know what that constraint is, we say yes. They tell the customer it's on its way, and guess what? We're not going to pick it because we've run out of capacity. So we worked out it was 800 pick lines on average, 800 pick lines a day. So I had to sit down with the salespeople to initiate a process which said, you've got 800 pick lines today. You tell me which ones you want me to pick. And my job is to pick the 800 for the team downstairs. And it was quite funny because we'd agree it. And then they'd take the warehouse manager to one and say, well, could you do this as well? And so I had to have some little interactions with people. So I became the most hated person on site. I also had an IT person. So we actually, once we worked out the 3448 errors we started developing reports to track these things off. I also had the extra supervision from an inventory guy who reported to the effectively a CFO, and he would come around and do checks and stuff like that. I said, well, have a look at what these reports you're doing. Showed me. I said, right, so what this 30% is, what does that 30% in? Oh, that's what accuracy at stock level, at rack level, location level. I said, really? I think you've got a calculation there. It said 70%. Sorry, that was 70%.
70%,
But it's actually 30% accurate.
Oh, wow.
So I went up to the CFO and said, do you ever look at this report? He said, yeah, I'd have a quick look at it and put it in my circular bin, circular filing system. do you understand what it's trying to tell you? We have a fundamental issue with our quality of our inventory balance. Only 30% of the random checks that are being done are actually accurate. Doesn't give you a bit of a cause for concern. You've just implemented and failed miserably on an ERP, and you've got an underlying inventory management issue that you've not addressed. Oh yeah, but we took stock 12 years ago. I said, well, guess what we're going to be doing this week? We're going to take stock. But it wasn't like that because I had to clear out all the individual bits. So can you imagine that you're running an operation mostly to wholesaling companies or trade, and you're getting hold of a V&A truck. You're going up about 10 levels. You're opening the box and you're getting something like this out. Worth about 50 cents. You're taking it down. You're putting it in a box. You're sealing it. You're putting a label on it, and you're sending it to. We have a distribution company over there called Target. It's costing you a fortune to. I said, we've got to stop single item picking in this warehouse. They have a case, a layer, or a pallet, nothing less than that. The only time that you can have, and these are all about trying to develop new business rules, the time you can have a variation to this, and it has to be agreed with manufacturing. If the box size would normally be, say, 6, and the customer only wants 48, manufacturing have to agree to produce 48. It can come through as a special order, and we can just ship it as a bundle. But in terms of other things, we had to take the whole system out and go back in again and just introduce bits, because they had, within JD Edwards, they have a standard warehouse management gauge. Then the goons decided, let's do the advanced version of this.
Interesting.
And on top of that, because they used to do it manually, people were, let's put guns in. So it's like a convolution of complete complexity. And that curve that I mentioned earlier on of, this is our ideal, but we actually migrated back down to the physical. Let's just computerize what we're doing now and forget everything else. So we had to extract the system, reconfigure it, and then just introduce bits of it. So I started off a process of trying to work out, firstly, how do we dual cycle in this situation? So instead of putting a truck into an aisle, putting something away, I wanted it to pick something from that. So I had to work the configuration of what you call over here interleaving. And then because there was a big stock problem caused by not having a stock take for 12 years, but more importantly, that if people, the sales reps will come in and say, customer screaming for this, I'm going to go and pick it, put it in the back of my car and take it to them. Yeah, but where's the paperwork? I don't need paperwork. It gets sorted out somehow. And so there was effectively massive theft going on. So without it being proper theft, it was like a complete and utter fundamental breakdown of inventory record. So I had to introduce bit by bit, but I had everybody doing all these different manual things, trying to figure out how do we get to a point where we can have a system which allows us to pick to zero. So we work in different ways and we're picked to zero. So what I wanted to do is I went from 724 to 5 days a week, one shift, but I had a stagger. So I had guys on the picking stuff coming in, actually picking the exact quantities we had to amalgamate a series of orders into a pick one, give them a proper instruction to pick, 2,000 of this, 121 of that, and they would bring it into an area. So I had to take a huge amount of racking down to create a picking area. They would put it into the picking area, then they send the pickers in, because it's all done at pedestrian level. So this is the idea of dual face picking. They would deliver it into here, the right quantities as they saw it.
Yeah.
Pick it to zero. If there was anything that was short, we don't take it all out, put it again until you learn to do it properly.
Yeah.
Or if it's over, so take it all apart, put it back until you get to learn to do it properly. So our stock factories went from 30 less to like 100, because it had a self-checking system in now. So we had to configure the system, one to spout the amalgamators so it could be bulk pick, and then run the actual orders across this sort of, I would say, almost a virtual set of locations, because we would book it into a specific location. We'd put something on the ground and just gave it numbers and said, just put it, and wrote on the bulk sheets for it to be sent to, so we could pick it. There was a lot of things also went on. I mean, when I arrived, I had a capacity of 800 order lines. I had 44,000 orders, and they were increasing. So, but I started the work in about October.
Yeah.
By February, I continued to run out of work. I'd cleared everything I could do. What it revealed was, because all the attention, this is how management teams can get distracted. So the warehouse wasn't getting stuff out on time.
Yeah.
Out of these queues inherited when I got there. So kill off all the queues, sort out the system, get everybody aligned with where we were going, including the union shops. Who actually on his hand and knees painting lines on the warehouse floor, because he's kind of got where we were going and he wanted to contribute. Yeah. I ran out of inventory to pick because there was a bigger issue than inventory accuracy. We weren't buying enough. We weren't buying enough stuff. And that only started to reveal itself towards the end of a project, recruiter component. So generally speaking, inside that small project, systems re-implementation, detailed configuration, process innovation, leadership through very challenging time, shift changing. I actually had 60 guys come at the time. I didn't like, so not only did the first step was to close a night shift. So we actually went to 2 shifts. 24 effectively. And then we said, no, we're all going to go on to 1 shift. And some people would sort of like, it did affect their domestic sort of arrangements, but said, look, this is what we've got to do. We've got to get on. We've got a slight staggered shift. And the chairman of the group, the Delta group, came round. He was looking at what was going on. The end of it, said, I've run out of work quite a few times, and he said, I don't understand. You got down to 1 shift. I said, it's quite easy, because our capacity got to 1,600. Right. 800. In the current configuration to 1,600 with 1 shift. I said, because I introduced dual face picking, I interleaving, and then dual face picking. One is I boosted our accuracy in no end to 100, and much more efficient in what we're doing. I can reduce the time to 1 shift, but it meant that I had to take lots of racking out so the whole workforce could be there. And he said, do you know what? I'm in a manufacturing plant just around the corner. I'm actually putting on 2 shifts because we've got so much work. I said, you know what? If you gave me more work, I'd still be with 1 shift because I'm keen. I know this process will work. It's completely scalable. But if you doubled the work, of course you'd have to start thinking about a different way of doing it. But for 15, 20%, this will work. So I think what I think that I'd like people to take away from this is sometimes we can get bogged down with these sort of ideal ideas of what we're going to achieve, and which quickly deteriorate to, once a time pressure and maybe even budget pressure, it deteriorates to sort of where we are already, and digitize that somehow. But as soon as things get a bit messy, it is a big firefight unless you inject somebody who knows what they're doing. And can steer their way through it. But they need to be put into a position of authority so that they can actually make people do things in a certain way rather than just carry on doing what we've been doing for maybe a number of years. Asking people, and we talked about this just before we get on the podcast, asking people who've been in the same situation for many years, asking them to change, as opposed to saying, look, we have to change, and these are reasons why we have to change. And if in the middle of a real burning platform firefight, then they'd probably be persuaded, especially if they have confidence that you know what you're doing, and they've seen that fairly quickly, a series of days or weeks, that they know that you have a technical competence to bring change around.
So some very interesting layers there, and I definitely want to touch on a little bit more on all of those, because you have a very specific experience inside warehouse when you talk about these inventory movements. I don't know how many people can really talk about that, so great job there. Okay, but overall, I think initially when you started, I don't think you sort of had the barcoding. That's why you sort of brought in the guns afterwards, and that's why there was a little bit of chaos. And obviously, if you are going to be introducing the barcodes without really realigning your processes, then you are probably going to have a lot of challenges there. Now, overall, when you look at the warehouse architecture, warehouse design, there are some of the problems, especially the ones you were talking about, is allocation. How do you sort of create the allocation mindset when you are not even able to figure out whether you have the right product at the right location at the right time? You will never be able to do that unless you sort of figure this out, right? So how do you align the physical processes with your digital ones? Because obviously you need to fix the physical first, and if you have barcoding, you might have a little bit of control there, right? That people cannot simply pick because the system is going to but even with systems, even if we barcoding, you can literally pick something and just put it there. Who stops you?
It's no guarantee of success, a barcode.
Exactly. So how do you...
It's all about discipline. It's all about making sure people understand that if they do move things around, it has to, if you're using handheld, it has to be scanned in a particular way to move it from here to there, and you may have to go for a certain type of transaction. So the people need to be trained to understand, I'm picking, I'm putting away, I'm transferring, depleting, I'm doing something, and there has to be a clear on the screen, whether on the voice or on the handheld, whatever it is, I'm doing this, and it has to be translated into a way that they can go, oh yeah, I'm picking, or I'm selecting, or whatever the language it is. And so it's a natural language that they use, as opposed to more sophisticated terms of, say, a warehouse designer might use. About allocation, just to clarify, the whole purpose of a warehouse management system should prevent you from trying to, and this is it cast your mind back, I said 3, 4, or 8 error, picking stuff in an unavailable position. It should never have even got to it. It should either be, it's either available or it's not. It can't be in a situation which is in the kind of quasi, it's sort of available, but it's not.
It's not.
It can come back later. Maybe things might change. So having the discipline in the configuration. So somebody must have ticked a box, unticked a box, or something. And I always say this about implementations, that these, when we're thinking about configuration, you'll get the systems guys walking up to the coffee, the water cooler, say, hey, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? And the person is just rushing between, oh yeah, that sounds a good idea. And then the system goes, right, that's a brief, here we go. And then it doesn't happen. You implement, you go 3 months,
Yeah.
you don't notice it, and all of a sudden something happens in the environment, and all of a sudden chaos breaks out.
Yeah.
And you can track it back to that conversation, that innocuous conversation where a proposal was put to somebody in a sort of very friendly kind of way, and said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, we'll go for that kind of thing, without understanding the real deep implications within the system and under what conditions that will backfire on somebody. So the configuration has to be really seriously controlled, and all those tick boxes, there's things, do you want this or that? Or, they all seem quite, I don't really understand. So yes, you need to understand what yes means.
Right.
It means in terms of desired or defined outcomes. And you got people on the system side. And I give a great example. I was involved with a startup.
Yeah.
And the founder was a lady who designed warehouse management systems.
Yeah.
But she hadn't been in a warehouse until I joined. And she took us to this warehouse.
Yeah.
And it was I daren't say who it was, but it was a pretty scrappy.
Yeah.
And I said, do you understand what's going on here? Do you understand this is a complete and utter mess? And she, well, no, I can see lanes and numbers and barcodes and whatever. I said, this is block stack. This is a product that suffers from high degrees of damage.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is the customer is being allowed to pick a box of this product in a block stack, which is 4 or 5 deep, 4 or 5 high.
Yeah.
So the pick has to come in, take these pallets out the way until it finds the pallet, take the box out, and hopefully put the pallets back on top of it and it doesn't topple, and then put all this other stuff back in.
Yeah.
One box. Doesn't make sense. And they could do so much better. They could have a box storage and they could have a pick phase, but they just thought they'd build the two together with a product that has a high propensity for damage. So we have people on the system side, and I've seen this. I did some work there in NYK for Sony, and they had a situation configured in the warehouse. They had P&D, they had physical P&D stations, but they had the string of put away to a pixel was a continuous string, but it was handled by 2 different people. Somebody put it in front of VR on the P&D station, and then somebody go, some work to let's go into that location. But each item had one bin. Yeah. Until the product was actually exhausted, which often meant nil picks or scratches in the warehouse, they couldn't put it in there because the pallet filled up the slot. So there was still some product on the product. The only way you could do it is take the half empty out, put the pallet in and take these off. Put it on. The difficulty was the aisle depth was 90 meters. It wasn't like a quick walk. It was like serious. And the other thing around that was I said that the product is clustered. Yeah. Which meant you had 3 or 4 pickers in one lane at any one time. So they were like doing this, buffeting each other. I said, well, have you done your pick yet? Because I've got to get out to get on with my pick on the next aisle. Yeah. And I used to have to take the people down and I said that we've got 14 hours, we've got 14 people, but guess what? We're all going into the same wretched aisle. Yeah. You work it out.
Very interesting conversation. I think we could go on for hours in this conversation, and I think we are still not going to be done, right? But for this episode, I think that's it. Do you have any last-minute closing thoughts or advice for our listeners by any chance?
Well, I think that my expertise in retail, end-to-end retail supply chain, particularly in the physicality of logistics, warehouse, transportation management, and the interfaces within the business. And I think that what the pandemic demonstrated, we really didn't know very much about the supply chain, even people in the supply, how they would play up in improving things in the short. Yeah. But we had. I did a study of people, leaders, CEOs present in Canada. Most of them had a background of sociology, psychology, anthropology. Yeah, it's good for understanding consumer behavior. Yeah. But suddenly, the pandemic changed our focus from the consumer to the stock and getting it in and getting it out through this thing called the warehouse or the logistics or the supply chain. Yeah. And they learned something. I'm not sure what they learned, but probably enough to be dangerous and to be able to make decisions which were dangerous longer term health of the business. And I would say to businesses that they absolutely need a chief supply chain officer, not just head of supply chain, which they keep out of all the decision real decisions. That person needs to be at the table, really helping a retailer or manufacturer to really make really informed decisions. We need a lot more data, a lot more informative data rather than just data. We might need to think about AI on that. And we mustn't misunderstand that, the warehouse isn't a couple of blokes chucking a few boxes around onto the back of a truck and job done. It's a lot complex than that. You can make very small changes operationally, which make big impacts on customer value. To deliver things on time and deliver things, most importantly, in full, so you don't have to do the trip again. So that would be my 3 thoughts.
Yeah, love it, to be honest. Okay. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be, whenever you are making a change, even if it is going to be a minor change, think through it. Okay. Yes. Don't just do it. On that note, Gary, thank you so much for your time. This has been a fascinating episode.
Cool. Excellent. Delighted to have a chat.
Of course. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you would like to learn more about Gary, head over to the supplychainspecialist.com. It's supplychainspecialist.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.